Hello and welcome to the channel. Today we are talking about how to think about the future, and with that, why growth mindset is important and how these two concepts kind of link back to each other. So the roadmap for today's video is I want to give a brief intro. We'll talk a little bit about terms and talk about how mindfulness, or the way we think about the present, and prospection, or the way we think about the future, can kind of connect back to each other in a positive way. And then I want to look at how healthy thinking about the future can, 1, improve our mental health, 2, help us with better decision making, and 3, potentially be a really powerful force to help us achieve our goals. I, in general, love exploring simple concepts related to psychology, how they lead to ways in which we can live deeper, fuller, more creative lives. So if that sounds interesting to you, go ahead and subscribe. You can see what I'm exploring every week. And in the meantime, let's get into it. So I want to start by saying that I love mindfulness, this concept of like how we can be really present and grounded in what's happening around us in the moment. I love. I've really been getting into that the last couple years. It's done a lot for my life. I have a video on that here, so if you're curious to know more about mindfulness, you can check that out. But I have also this past year started listening to Dr. Benjamin Hardy. He is an organizational psychologist and a teacher on this concept of transformational psychology. So he does a lot of talking and teaching about how we can take our lives from where they are now to a better version of ourselves in the future, how we can achieve our goals, overcome self-doubt, this kind of thing. Really great. Highly recommend if you're interested at all in having a better concept or understanding of the future. Check out his stuff. I'll link one of his videos here, because this today I'm doing a really brief overview, like very cursory, give you some basic concepts, but if you want to dig a little deeper, he has a ton of content and it's really good. So I started listening to him this past year and I thought, wow, the way we think about the future is so important. And I've come across the question in my mind before of wondering, can you do both? Like, is it better to focus more on the present or more on the future? Like, it seems like you can't do both. But I'm discovering that you can and actually should do both. And in fact, they all kind of weave together. If we have a really healthy ability to like accept where we are in the present, it helps us have a healthier attitude towards the future and a healthy ability to reflect on the past. So we want to watch out for unhealthy thinking in any of these categories. And I think we want to spend most of our time in the present moment, but we want to be able to do all three. So thinking about the future, or prospection, is hugely important in our lives, and now we're going to start talking about why. Okay, so first of all, it can help improve our mental health. And I got most of my research today from the Greater Good magazine, which is a publication out of Berkeley. I will link the article specifically that I was reading, but if you hear me referencing studies or research, it's in that article. They did the studies. I did not. So poor prospection, or an inability to really think positively about the future, has been linked to depression. Patients suffering from depression tend to have a very negative opinion about their futures. They don't see themselves moving in a positive direction. They don't have high hopes for where they're going to be in the next few years, or even maybe the next few days. And which comes first, right? Is it that the poor prospection helps cause depression, or that depression impacts the way we think about the future? Probably both. I don't know for sure, but the two are definitely linked, and that is very noteworthy. So now there's even a form of cognitive behavioral therapy, which is therapy designed just to kind of retrain our thought patterns, or the way we look at ourselves in the world. There's a form of cognitive behavioral therapy now designed to help retrain the way patients think about their futures, and it's been showing to be pretty effective. So if we have habits of thinking positively about our future, it's very clearly linked to our mental health. And this makes sense, because if you feel positive and hopeful about where your life is and where your life is going, of course, you're likely to feel like a happier person. So it makes really logical sense. Then having really healthy, positive prospection can also help us in making better decisions. If you're able to think proactively about the future, it'll help you plan ahead for that future and make better decisions now for where you will be. And this particularly helps with something called delay discounting, and I am really interested in that term. Delay discounting is simply when we indulge in something in the here and now rather than waiting for a greater reward in the future. So we don't want delay discounting. It's something most of us default to. But if we want to achieve any goal, if we want to improve any element in our lives, odds are we need to discipline ourselves somehow or put something off now so that we can have it later. And having a strong link to a concept of your future self is very powerful in helping us to overcome this idea of delayed discounting. Have a little more power over ourselves and then a little more say about where we're going in our lives. Which brings me very tidily to point number 3, which is that it can help us to achieve our goals. And this was my favorite bit of research this week because I definitely learned something new here, and it's that thinking about the future does not automatically help you achieve your goals. It depends how you think about the future. And the critical distinction here was the difference between fantasy and expectation. So a fantasy is like a daydream, right? It's far off in the future. It's not something we maybe expect to actually achieve. Usually we have a lot of like pleasure in thinking about it. It's a very satisfying way of thinking about the future, but it's not necessarily tied to reality. That's a fantasy. An expectation is something that we have actual plans, or like we can see how we could get there. So what they've been finding is actually that fantasizing a great deal about your future can actually decrease your chances of achieving those goals or ever actually reaching that reality of your future self that you have in your mind. Whereas building expectations increases the odds of you actually achieving that. And this makes sense because if we don't feel a connection, like if we have a dream of our future selves that's really, really far removed from where we are now, we're not going to be very inspired to work towards it because it doesn't feel real. It feels like a daydream. It feels like a fantasy. And the other thing about this is that fantasizing is enjoyable, right? So to a certain extent, if we have a habit of fantasizing often, we're actually indulging a little bit in delayed discounting because we are enjoying the experience now rather than working to really live it in the future. And that might sound hokey, but our brains are so powerful. So much has been found about the power of imagination and really thinking your way through things. On the flip side, if you spend a lot of time visualizing yourself overcoming obstacles, you're more likely to successfully overcome those obstacles. So when we spend time daydreaming and indulging in fantastic ideas of our future, there is a part of our brain that thinks we actually already did it. So of course we're less inspired to like knuckle down and put in the hard work. And this is not to say that fantasies are out and out bad. We all need a little bit of time, I think, to daydream, to like come up with great ideas about where we wish we could be in our wildest dreams. Like that's fun and good to a certain extent. But what we want to be able to do is tie our fantasies back to reality. And if we can honestly look at where is this fantasy version of myself, how far away is it from where I am now, and what would it take for me to get there? Like, what are the obstacles in my way? Another study was showing very clearly, and not surprisingly, that students who took time to look at the obstacles in their way to a certain career path were much more likely to have great success in that career path than students who spent time fantasizing about it but didn't dig into the obstacles. So it's not really shocking. But what we want to do is take our fantasies, evaluate the obstacles in our way so that we can turn them into expectations and say, okay, well, this is what's in my way. I expect that I can overcome those things, and that will turn it into a reality. So it's kind of exciting, I think, as a way of thinking. And it was a really helpful, clear breakdown for me because there is an area in my work life where I have absolutely had a really clear fantasy and like elements of my reality that were directed towards it, but the expectations in the middle were kind of missing. Like I didn't have a clear stepping through to get to where I wanted. So I'm hoping I kind of fix that and apply it, but I really liked learning about that this week. So hopefully that makes sense. Thinking about the future can absolutely help us achieve our goals, but it depends how we do it. We want to have a proactive element to the way we think about it. So finally, as like a last tag note for this video, if you're looking for tangible ways to kind of train your mind to have a little bit more positive ideas about prospection and how you think about the future, there is an exercise you can apply, which is simply thinking about 3 good things you expect to have happen tomorrow. And I've talked before, I think maybe in my video on mindfulness or in some other one, about the importance of gratitude and really being aware of what we have in our lives already that is good, and it helps us appreciate and really live well in the present. And that's so important. I love that exercise. So this one's different. It's thinking about what do you hope or expect will happen tomorrow. So you want to make it something tangible, not a fantasy, something really in your life that you think is a good thing you can look forward to tomorrow. And that exercise in and of itself will help train your brain to be a little bit more forward thinking in a positive way, especially if you struggle with catastrophizing or looking at the future in a very negative light. This is a good counter exercise, but we want it to be an expectation because we don't want to train ourselves to look forward to things that will not happen and then have them not happen and then train ourselves to never have hope. That's not the goal. So we want to look forward to something realistic. And then the second part is think of potential obstacles. These are the things I'm really looking forward to tomorrow that I hope and expect will happen. These are a couple things that could keep them from happening. What can I plan ahead in order to avoid them? And this is a perfect exercise because it's training ourselves to have a little bit of power and control in our lives and in making good things happen for ourselves. Like, that's so important. We don't want everything we look forward to be entirely out of our control. Then life is out of our control, and that's stressful. So we want to think about ways we could potentially mitigate any obstacles and really make sure that these positive things happen. So that's a cool exercise you can apply if you're looking for ways to really bring this into your daily life. Oh, and if you're looking for more ways to really think about the future, going back to Dr. Benjamin Hardy, just because I'm a fan, he has a lot of videos on journaling as well. He gives you very clear journal prompts that help plan and think about the future, and he kind of draws the connection from fantasy to expectation. Really good stuff. So if you're looking for maybe some journal entries as well, he's got those too. So I hope you found that helpful. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. If you're interested in this content, go ahead and subscribe, and I will see you next time.